We're getting down towards the end. I want to thank everybody for sticking through. We're almost done. I would just like to get a sense from the audience of how many before today knew about the Evan Liblit Scholarship Fund. Raise your hands. I would say maybe about 20% or so. We talked a lot about zealots. I think what a zealot is an advocate with a lot of energy, and that adequately describes Evan Liblit, who lived a full life. He was ahead of us on a lot of things. He was, in addition to basically overseeing the development of the state's first recycling plan, he was also at the forefront of developing household hazardous waste programs. He also worked for local government, state, federal, and private recyclers, and unfortunately passed away at the age of 47. And we that knew him, not me personally, but some others that knew him, formed this committee to try to carry on his legacy. We're very proud of the Liblit scholars that are here today. In many ways, the scholars carry on the same kind of energy and commitment that Evan did. So Evan would be very proud. This is the first time that this scholarship committee held a symposium, and I think it was very successful. We do have our biggest event of the year is a breakfast in November that you're all entitled to come to. That's where we raise money to pay for the graduate and undergraduate scholarships. So please keep us in mind. But I think one of the things that came through today is that we have had a great dialogue. We've had processors, collectors, governments, legislators, regulators, even an ancient alien, and now we have citizens. So I don't know who else you can add to that, but we're trying to get all perspectives and get people talking to each other. And so today we have Maureen Murphy, who is from the Citizens Campaign for the Environment, representing citizens, and we have Peter Stevens, who is a resident of the town of Brookhaven, and I'll turn it over to them to give their perspective.
Okay. So I know it's late and we're only running, an hour and a half behind, but I just have a few slides. So what do I hit? This one? So I thought it would be good. We talked a lot about recycling right and wish cycling. And here on Long Island, we know we're kind of this patchwork. So where are we starting from? So just thinking about single stream recycling, who switched, who didn't, who switched back. The city of Long Beach and the city of Glen Cove are possibly still on single stream, possibly not. From their websites, it's hard to tell. And then what are we all recycling? So we're all recycling different things. And we're just going to go through what the towns are recycling, but we also have the villages, the garbage districts. I mean, just in the town of North Hempstead alone, we have all of those three entities breaking up into possibly over 30 different collection districts between town, village, and district. So just for the towns, plastic recycling 1 and 2, we have Brookhaven, East Hampton, Oyster Bay, Southampton, and Southold. We did this just in January, so it should be new and not changed. The town of Islip takes plastics 1, 2, and 5. I don't know what happened to the others, and I don't know why 5 is in there, but it is. The town of North Hempstead, 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. And then we have the category of all plastics. So Babylon, Hempstead, Huntington, Riverhead, Smithtown, Glen Cove, and Long Beach are taking all of our plastics. No glass recycling is happening in the town of Brookhaven and in the town of Oyster Bay, unless you're taking it to the transfer station. So we get to this, we can solve this crisis through education. And we can and we do need to use education as a tool, but we need a better starting point. When we have municipalities, I think it was Anthony that said, we work in one municipality, we live in another municipality, and none of these programs are consistent. We're not recycling the same things across the board. I went through some of the town's websites just to see what kind of information they had for their residents, and it was all over the map. Some towns had these very nice charts. Other towns, this was from the village of Patchogue, included some pictures in the charts. This was the town of North Hempstead, just kind of a list of things that you should and should not recycle. The town of Smithtown had this chart up on their website, but there was no uniformity to any of the materials. So we're not starting off at the same place, and then when we go to find information as a consumer, it's all in different areas. You really have to search, you really have to look for it. So part of it is, can we create a uniform standard here on Long Island? Can we all recycle the same things? I know these are tough questions, and maybe the answer is no, we can't. But does every village have to have a different recycling program than the towns, than even the school districts? I mean, how many of our schools are still not recycling? How many of our businesses are still not recycling? In my daughter's elementary school, the school recycling program is the parents get to pick up the water bottles once a week and then bring them, collect the money, and bring it back to the school as a fundraiser. Is that really a recycling program? I think we could do better. We've talked about the bottle bill a lot. So I'm just going to have to add our 2 cents because we understand the municipalities and the funding issues, and we agree we need to get wine and spirits in there, but we also really agree the bottle bill is working. And that's why we want to expand it, because we're seeing the collection rates higher in those states. As we've heard from a lot of presentations this morning, those that have a 5-cent deposit on the bottles have higher recycling rates for those materials. I'm not going to belabor the point. Packaging and paper. I think Andrew was up here talking about producer responsibility. And yes, we need producer responsibility. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we did not anticipate the amount of boxes that we would have. We didn't know that we would order everything online, from groceries to toothbrushes to diapers to anything in between. Food waste is something we haven't really talked about today, but it is 18% of New York's solid waste stream. 25% of the food we buy is wasted, and 2.5 million New Yorkers face food insecurity. Assemblyman Engelbright talked about the legislation that we have in the state. It's something that CCE is pursuing along with other groups across New York. This is the wave of the future, and to reduce our waste stream even further. Plastic pollution, one of my favorite topics. I actually brought a handout too. There was a press conference this afternoon. A lot was mentioned about the Suffolk County law. Putting 5 cents on something really does change public behavior. It's true with bottles, it's true with bags. In Suffolk County, we have estimated that we've used 1.1 billion less bags last year because of the law that went into effect. 1.1 billion bags not used in Suffolk County.
Has to be million. Can't possibly be billion.
Billion. I will double check that for you.
Please.
That's
5,000 a person. That's a
So-
5,000 a person.
That's 1,000 bags a person.
No, yes, the average is 1,000 bags per person, just so you know, that is right. In the Littoral Society collects beach cleanup information on what was picked up off of the beaches. So in Suffolk County in 2017, they picked up 2,785 plastic bags. At their 2018 beach cleanup, when the law was enacted and in effect, they picked up 1,552 bags. A 41% reduction of plastic bags picked off of our beaches because of the law that was implemented. That's the end of my slideshow.
I'm Peter Stevens, and my title on the agenda is homeowner. I'm certainly not here to speak for all homeowners. Maybe it's my job to just issue a little bit of comment. You'll be glad to hear that I have absolutely no prepared remarks, and so I'm just going to offer a couple of comments on things that I've observed in the last few months and things that I've heard here today. The idea that recycling, that what I could recycle from my home changed so radically due to stories which may or may not be true about whether China was going to buy our paper or not, I find that in very serious conflict with the questions that we opened this conference with, this meeting with. Larry asked us, Larry Swanson, why do we recycle? And I don't believe that we recycle because there's somebody who will pay for my recyclables. I'm much more on the because it's the moral thing to do, because it's the right thing to do, because it has to do with passing on the earth we want to our children. And so it's really a matter of will that those materials be picked up. That my government won't deal appropriately, that my government says, oh no, this is going to go into the landfill because we can't sell it, I think is a failure of government or of society to account the price of dealing with waste disposal. And so this change in recycling patterns I find quite mysterious. I've heard today many things that have clarified why that is, but I have to say I still find it mysterious. For example, I haven't learned what's so bad about plastics number 3, 4, 5, and 6, that all of a sudden they're not to be taken. It's an education how many things come in 3, 4, 5. My organic yogurt, well, I thought, I'm good for doing that. Oops, it's a 6. So the plastic container is going to go into the garbage once I've had the yogurt. Anyway, I feel little communicated to. All right, I'm not every homeowner in Long Island, but I regard myself as reasonably well informed, and I am mystified by many of the actions that go on around the waste industry, around the collection of waste. And I believe that that's at least partly a failure, again, of the town. I have a friend who lives in Smithtown who receives, for some reason, notifications every Wednesday or every Tuesday that Wednesday is the time that Brookhaven is going to pick up their recyclables. Well, he lives in Smithtown, so that's not relevant. I don't get that information. I don't know how to get onto that mailing list to receive those reminders. Maybe if I were on that mailing list, I would have known when they changed our garbage pickup from Monday, Thursday to Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Friday as well. That remains another little mystery to me. Anyway, those are my reactions, and I hope there are some action items for our representatives and for ourselves in holding our representatives to task there. Thank you.
And I did check the number, it is billion.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, Mr. Stevens. I'm a Brookhaven resident, also homeowner. I agree that we should all just be, know, well, hippy dippy and want to do this voluntarily, that's not going to happen. People don't stop at red lights in Long Island unless there's a sign telling them they're going to get a ticket. So that to me is just not a realistic approach. Although again, I don't put a hose in my recycles, okay? So I do try to do that. Also, all that information's on their website. You know, I do what the days are changing because of that. They'll pop up on your email, so you can get all that information. But what would you do other than just say we should all be doing this from our hearts and souls and minds? Because it's not going to happen that way. It's only going to happen with a money component.
Well, I think it's only going to happen, my opinion, is that it's going to happen, there's a money aspect to it, but there's also a public will aspect to it. And I think when Adrienne Esposito was here earlier, she brought up the very important analogy to the smoking ban in bars and restaurants. When that was first announced, I thought, as if. That's never going to happen. Well, turns out I was wrong, and it
That wasn't done by hearts and minds, though. That was done by laws and fines.
well, now wait a minute. Those laws and fines were imposed, you know, not by King John, but by elected representatives. So it comes back to the actions. Somehow there had to be a public will. I don't believe that at the wrong time, if someone had come in and said, okay, no more smoking in bars and restaurants, they'd have been out of office so fast. There was a public will to do that.
There was also no cost involved with making that happen, though.
Right, but there's two
There's a
things.
cost involved with trying to execute the recycling program.
You need education and you need incentivization. You know, and that's why before the Suffolk bill went into effect, we were doing a lot of education on bringing your own bags. We were working with supermarkets, we were working with residents, we were working with businesses. We were asking businesses to put up reminders to remember to bring your bag from the trunk into the store. And yes, it was working, but once the law took effect, we saw a dramatic shift in public behavior. Changing public behavior is one of the hardest things to do. And it can be done, but it's going to take both incentivization and education to do that.
Dr. Harris,
Stevens.
I'm the fisherman in the department in town of Brookhaven, and I can tell you one of the things that we failed on early on was communication. We immediately addressed that, and one of the things that we did to address that was to go out into the community, and I'm out sometimes 2-3 nights a week speaking at various civic associations. I may have seen you, may, perhaps, or maybe not, but one of the questions I ask people is, we explained to them how we were getting paid a positive revenue stream, and now how it would have cost us $3.5 million to maintain the program as it was, and that would have resulted in a tax increase that would have forced our elected officials to pierce the local tax cap. And I can tell you from, I have to tell you, it got to be a dozen civics that I've been to. I had 2 people that actually raised their hand and indicated that they would have been willing to incur a tax increase in order to keep the program. Beyond the tax increase, the big problem that we had was some of the material that we were moving to various markets. We really didn't have a great deal of assurances that they were actually recycling the material. I mean, I knew they were taking my material, I knew they were taking my money, but I don't know what they were doing with it downstream. And so it became a real issue with me saying, okay, you know what, I'll pay $120, $140 per ton to maintain my recycling program. By the time I got the material to the market or to the processor that took it to the market, transportation, et cetera, there was no guarantees that these people were actually doing what they said they would do. They were taking whatever material that had a market value to it, and then sell that, and then whatever else they did with the remaining material, nobody seems to know. Because, at the end of the day, recycling to a lot of people that are in this business is, what you can get paid for. If you can't get paid for it, it's a cost avoidance. When that cost avoidance becomes greater than the cost of disposal, it's just garbage. I hate to say it like that, that's just the reality of it. And so for us to do that, the elected officials that we have, a lot of decisions. I made a point earlier. I mean, something as simple as road work, right? There's potholes, there's roads that need to be done, and they're balancing where those dollars are going. And, to ask for them to increase taxes so that I can have another $4 million a year to sell my material to a place that I'm not even sure is actually really recycling once it gets downstream, would have been a good decision for me to make. I hope that made sense to you. I've kind of
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yes. Well, I don't have a question, I have a comment. I think, a lot of us here are in the business of recycling, and I emphasize business. But we gotta remember that the entire environmental movement was inspired by public back in the first Earth Day. It was not business or anything else. Business bought it. Since then, in many cases, in fact, it's been shown to be economically valuable to have engaged in environmental ethic. The same is true, I think, with recycling. Recycling was largely driven by a public demand to reduce packaging in the mid-1980s. It was driven by the Iceland garbage barge, or the Long Island garbage barge. I don't mean to say Icelanders necessarily. And it was driven, the public got upset. They also got upset with the high prices of landfilling at the time. So the greater public, I think, can drive us all to do a better job and not just consider that if it doesn't have economic value today, it's not worth trying to do and to build markets for the future.
And I think, a key point to remember is the 3 R's. The first R is reduce. To reduce our waste to begin with. And I know Legislator Hahn is here, and she has some really great bills pending on the Suffolk County level to reduce more plastic waste, to reduce straws, to reduce plastic cutlery, to reduce the styrofoam that we use. So these are all tools that we need to keep in our toolbox too.
I would just suggest that while those actions are really laudable, and I applaud it, and they should definitely be pursued, to a great extent, being able to reduce is more of an upstream kind of phenomenon. On the local level, we may have limited ability to have the kind of impact that manufacturers have when they are incentivized to design for recyclability. It's more of an upstream.
I think straws are a
role for
perfect
everybody.
example. Manufacturers haven't been pushing paper straws. That's a complete grassroots demand that the manufacturers, the ones flexible, have responded to. Manufacturers and also retailers. So I think paper straws, the increasing demand for paper straws, is a very important lesson for the ability of people who are motivated and see a problem, the citizenry that sees a problem, to demand a change, and for that change to suddenly, once it's demanded, to become economically viable.
David?
So waste reduction is an interesting phenomenon. So mostly we, at the local level, we would achieve that by reusing things. And when we reuse things, we tend to wash things more. So that's going to bring into play, yes, we're going to have less solid waste, but now we're going to have more wastewater. And here on Long Island, wastewater is a big issue of the moment. And so you're going to have to balance these things as you consider. And so it was really great when Carrie was here, and she underscored the fact that she dealt in multiple areas of interest for Long Island. And you have to keep that holistic vision if you're really going to address environmental problems and not just waste or water problems.
Yeah.
We're now in the last section. We're now in our last session. What do we do next? So you guys stay right where you are. Don't move. Let's just keep this going.
So, Larry, I would disagree a little bit with your historical perspective. Landfill rates were very, very cheap in the 80s and 90s. I remember in 1989 coming out of school, and our tip fee at Brookhaven Landfill was under $10 a ton. Landfill rates were so cheap that there was no economic incentive for even transfer stations to pull out certain items that would have a positive value, because the labor to pull out those items and the machinery didn't work. It was the increase in landfill rates that caused things. The Mobro of 1987, the town of Islip Barge, the Mobro.
10% nice stuff was on that.
You weren't even at Islip.
And then this is 82.
That was a public awareness and relations crisis. But let's not forget, recycling's been going on for thousands of years from the perspective of metal recycling. Paul Revere was a metal recycler, and paper recycling. And all of that was not done by government, not sponsored by government, not asked for by government, not mandated by government. It wasn't even done for feel good. It was done because it was profitable. The steel industry does not, in the United States, 85% of the steel mills are electric arc furnaces, which means they do not need iron ore or coal or bauxite to make steel. They use scrap. Yet in China, it's the exact opposite, where close to 85% of the steel mills are open hearth furnaces, so they need iron ore. And as we well know, or I know and I'm informing you, China has a 15-year plan to convert all of its steel mills to electric arc furnaces, because China's advancing its own internal collection system. The issue at hand is not the commercial recycling, not the private guys. The issue at hand is the government mandated recycling and the concept that when you get away from the concept of cost avoidance, do we landfill it, do we burn it, do we reprocess it, remanufacture into something else? And we take that concept and put it with the moral concept that we don't want to landfill it and we don't want to burn it, because we do have an objection to burning here in the United States. We should be waste energy. That's where the confusion comes in. But recycling on the private side, and you have the private investors here, the private companies, been going on for hundreds of years.
Well, let me just add something to your remark, Kevin. You know, we're talking about Larry mentioned the barge, you mentioned the barge, and there's a difference, yes, between, I was not aware so much of the degree of commercial industrial recycling, where the sources come from, versus residential recycling. But when you go back to that barge, you know, the thing you have to bear in mind that that happened in March of 1987. Before that barge sailed, there were fewer than 600 curbside recyclables collection programs in the United States. Within 5 years of the barge, there were 10,000. That had a spectacular effect. It was a shot in the arm that you could not have found any other way. And it happened by accident. You know, it was a fantastic blunder by the people that set it off, but it drew attention to waste like nothing else ever did, and nothing else has since. So we like recycling, we do it, and you know we're now in a trying to wrestle with it to make it continue to work, and maybe get it bigger and better. But my question to you guys is: do we need to spend do we need to spend money on this? Do we need to upgrade our infrastructure on the island? Are we organized well enough in a town-by-town basis? We have 14 different family units on this island. What do you think?
I recently got back from Australia, and Australia is as big as all of Europe put together, and only 10% of it is populated. So they could landfill the lemon cheese out of this place, right? They don't. They make it so convenient for everybody to know we didn't see any rubbish. There was no straws offered to us. It's just everybody's mindset, but it's based on, I swear, convenience. Because there are people from all around the world there who are not raised in their culture, who also see those three-way bins there, who also see, you know, everybody operating in a certain way. I think the more convenient you make it, you'll get more participation, because if it's there, you'll do it. You'll throw it in the right hole.
So just to comment on that, I do agree convenience is really, I think, where we need to go with this. But even today, sorry, I think I was remarking that I agree. Convenience needs to be a priority, just in what I've seen in my family and friends, even people who care about the environment. If it's not convenient, they might say, oh, just this one time, I won't do it. And then that becomes all the time. And as you saw, Kendrea's garbage outfit, that was from our house, and we're environmentalists, right? And that's the Environmental Club house. So that's the situation. But just today, you know, we had recycling bins and garbage bins, and if you look inside, even in our group, we were not able to do it. How much more convenient could it have been?
Well, personally, I'm confused with all the different kind of plastics. I didn't know if that plate was a 1, 2, 3, 7. I had no idea.
So, and that goes
Just
to
a
the
plate.
education
And
point.
then there was food on it, so now it's dirty plate, right? So I didn't know.
Should have had single-use items at an event like this, period.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. And
China.
you know what? As you know, Maureen was saying, education is important because one of the first things that I learned when I got to Stony Brook was that there were different kinds of plastic. I did not know that my entire life, that there were different kinds of plastic, and I grew up on Long Island. And you know, you can tell the number of the recyclable by looking at the triangle on the plate.
Once it's dirty, you're not doing that.
So I mean, there's a lot of parts playing into this.
It wasn't convenient for me to get that plate right.
It's just picking up on that theme of convenience. I think there's a few other C words that kind of come to mind too as you look at close that. It's the consistency, right? I mean, I think, you know, in other countries, you know, I look at, I think, you know, as a former chief sustainability officer for a few Fortune 100 companies in the US and globally, it used to drive me crazy with the employees going from one office to another, and, you know, it was even different on a residential program. But I think that also comes back to contracts too. One of the things, we gotta do a better job sharing information against contracts because they're all over the place. But I also think it comes back to capacity in the infrastructure, and possibly even competency among some of the players. But capacity is a real issue in terms of the different state-of-the-art MRFs. I was out in San Francisco visiting some MRFs out there in the south, right by the airport. I think it's a Recology, amazing facility. But you know, that's state-of-the-art, and you know, Tom, I think you know your Sims plants are up there too, and I bet there's some out here in Long Island. But bringing up investing, we definitely need to invest, but I'd like to leave it at this is, we talk about zero waste, and it's a real aspirational goal. You know, I think maybe we have to redefine this, and maybe the Chinese sword issue is going to be our next, you know, barge, if pardon the pun. But think about waste independence. If we can solve this within 500-mile radius, and not, it just doesn't make sense even to my kids explain why we're shipping stuff around the world and processing it. It just adds a lot of cost, time, and complexity. But if we can become, you know, waste independent and use that like we did with energy independent, I think we can align a lot of stakeholders, whether they're business, environmental, or et cetera. And hopefully that's where we might be able to move to.
Mike, I think the first step is, you know, coming to reality. I think the reality of the situation, everyone has to address. What's the reality of what we can do economically? Okay, what should be done? How do we make, you know, the product manufacturers make things homogeneous? How do we deal with collection of hard items, you know, such as the glass we talked about? But the part about reality, and I'll go back to what I wanted to address with Dave on the glass, is that, and again, Dave, don't answer this, but DEC is going to make every town, knowing that glass is contaminating the recyclables in the way we collect it, that it has no value, it's being landfilled, it's being washed at the source, it's taking energy to grind it up, energy and diesel to transport it, okay? And they're gonna have every town that doesn't want to collect it in the program any longer make an evaluation and be challenged on that evaluation on whether it complies with the law or not, knowing full well that DEC knows what the challenges are, okay? Now, I'm not an advocate of not recycling it, and I'm absolutely an advocate of never having a glass bottle go to a waste energy plant, right? I don't see the harm in having it go into a landfill directly without all those intermediate steps that cost us a lot of money, right? But DEC says, in their mind, I allege, okay? We can't just give a free ride to the towns. They're children. We don't let them recycle glass today. They're gonna run amok tomorrow. Tell Chris Andre he doesn't have to collect it anymore. And forget about Brookhaven. Brookhaven's the largest town on Long Island, will never collect it. And what I'm saying is, I understand where everyone's coming from. I'm saying, let's get back to reality. Because as soon as DEC says it's a problem, then DEC marches into the governor's office and says, hey, it's a problem. Once we all recognize it's a problem, problems get fixed. How many times in this country, in all the last 3 or 4 years with the issues that are about us that came through, like the Me Too movement. What was the real problem 20 years ago with Me Too? Nobody looked at reality. Nobody actually said this was occurring. So because they didn't say it, because they closed their eyes to it, it was never addressed. Once it became public, once it got addressed, we fixed it pretty well in pretty short order. So my challenge is the reality. Let's get to the reality of solid waste.
In the back.
Yes, well, a small step. I'm the chair of the University Environment Committee. One of our subcommittees is working on a plan that will be able to, meetings like this will be able to rent China from food service. So perhaps next year's symposium will not use disposables.
And staying with the theme on, where do we go from here? I agree with Maureen, some type of uniformity would be real important. I mean, I said to you, I've been speaking to some of the civics and stuff, and one of the things that commonly comes up is what somebody else was saying here, how do I know what kind of plastics are? Of course, the answer is, well, just look at the triangle. And a lot of people say, I don't know what the hell the triangle means. And so I think getting together on some type of uniformity on what goes in and what goes out is probably important as well. But it comes back to what I said before, too. As someone who's responsible for spending public dollars, what's my protection that what I'm putting into my menu is actually going to get recycled? Because that's a real big issue. Because if someone says, I don't have a whole lot of confidence now after hearing George say that the people that manufacture stuff aren't willing to use the recycled material. Because if they're not willing to use recycled materials, then they're using virgin material, right? And so where is my recyclables going if it's not going back into using anything? And what's my protection if someone says to me, I'll take your 1s and 2s and your 5s, and they take my 1s and 2s and recycle my 1s and 2s and they throw my 5 out. I'm telling my people that I'm recycling 1s, 2s, and 5s when in reality 5s are getting thrown out. And so, this whole downstream thing, where's my protection so that there's some level of certainty that my material is actually being recycled?
Which goes to the credibility of your program. If people find that you said you were recycling and it ain't going there, and
yeah, so I want to understand. Don't answer this question. As Anthony said, I want to understand what's wrong with disposable plates, disposable forks, disposable cups that we have today. What's wrong with that? I want to eat on something that I know is sanitary and safe. If we're going to take dishes and plates and cups, there's the whole issue of, is it sanitary and safe? One of the things about the solid waste industry is the most important thing is to protect our health. That's what we call them, sanitary landfills. So we protect our health and our safety, right? So the benefit of disposable is that I know it's a sanitary item that I'll put my food on. If we don't do that, and we go into something else, then as David points out, we have to wash and clean at 180 degrees for like 30 seconds or 1 minute or something. And somebody's going to pick it up and put it on a rack and pick it up and put it over there. Better have the right hygiene for that situation.
Plus the chemicals in the detergent.
So I want to understand what's wrong with disposable products. There's nothing wrong with it. It's what we do with it after it's been disposed of.
No, let me just answer that. Now, what if we take that paper plate? No, and we bring it to Covanta.
Nobody's supposed to answer this question.
No, but what if we take that plate, we bring it to Covanta, we put it in the Covanta, and we burn it, it's a high BTU item, and we get energy from it? Wouldn't that be a better idea for that paper plate than to wash it, than to have China and wash it? That's why what I'm suggesting on the reality is that all of these questions are really hard to answer. And it takes the manufacturer, the processor, the industry, the public, the people, the politicians to come together and to make the decision on the 15% right answer. Because everything else at 85 is wrong. Let's come together and let's figure out what the right thing to do is and implement it. That's the solution, because that's a really good argument.
The reality is, you've been in business for 30, how many, 40 years, 100 years you said?
Almost 90.
And God bless you for being,
and we were recycling when Staten Island and New York City was zero on
so you got it right. And that's what you should do. That's where you've been doing this whole lecture on our society and our culture and stuff, and you're making money sustainably, God bless you. And all the other representatives of industry that are doing this job. That's great. But it's not right yet. It's still not right yet. I don't care how much money you make. But we started the day looking at carcasses littered with lighter, right? David's talking about an equation that mandates recycling to happen, and it's based on what's the cost versus what's the other cost to compare it to, right? And you did a nice job with the sentence about the glass. And you said, well, then we've got to crush it, we've got to put it in a truck, then we've got it back to the landfill to use it as cover for the landfill where we didn't want to put it as a glass, but now you can grind it up and drive it back over there and put it on the same. But it showed how the equation is kind of funky. But your equation stopped. It didn't include any expression of the cost of those carcasses or of the web. So that's how it will actually change the next time. I believe Gershaw, they're going to do fine, and so will Omni, Pratt. These guys are going to keep cranking because they're working.
We're all
Delta.
just making payroll.
Do whatever you want, but you've been doing it for decades, so something's working. You got your input cost, and you got your product cost, and God bless you for balancing that thing out. But we're still not bringing into the equation the cost that's our crying Indian or whatever you want to call it. We don't have a monetization of whales, birds,
side of the road,
the plastic that isn't really breaking down, it's breaking into pieces. That cost has to become monetizable. Then we'll have a much bigger driver, and you guys can go nuts. I might even join you in ways to, but so David, the question is for you. How at the state level can we include that cost in the equation? But it can't just be a New York cost, because everybody go to New Jersey, then go to Pennsylvania, then go to Kentucky. So how do we do it at a level that brings that in and flattens it out, so we really have the natural resource cost? So if you want to have a sanitary product to eat with, great, sanitary. Then when you put it in a thing, it chokes a bird. So it's not quite sanitary for them. I want that cost into the, how do we do that?
Almost none of the U.S. plastic is prohibited. It's so-called CO2.
Let me ask you, is there a way that the DEC could use our collective voice to drive the market further than where it's going now? Because these folks could do even better if we had the rest of the costs in it.
I think it's my heart, I think it's an excellent point. I made a note of it. I'm trying to figure out if I can get out of here, if it's going to beat the crap out of me before I get out of there. If I try to put any more costs on this, but you're right, there is that impact. And I think the place for it, for us now, can I do something on the state level and make that all change instantly? No, the state doesn't have that kind of power.
Well, in the
Could we
natural
do it on a
resource
federal
assessment,
place?
yeah.
Can we do it on a, and I think those are the bigger answers, but that isn't an overnight thing. So for me, the message that you had, I think is good. It's a piece we don't talk about even in our guidance. It's something that we're in the process of developing our new state solid waste management plan, and we're getting ideas from people about different things that we should educate on, figure out the impacts on, share in a different way. When one of the individuals had talked about impacts on marine life that they were involved in, and so I think we have to. I think that's probably the place for the state to start to talk about it. I don't think we're going to solve it, but I think we can start to talk about it.
Oil spills are a good example of that, where the majors know it's still their cost, because we can. My company can figure out, is that Exxon, is that Venezuelan oil? So they still own the liability because it's oil. And in the natural resource damage assessment code, it keeps them involved. Resource equivalency assessments, REAs. That's how you monetize, at least that they do at the federal level.
But going back to Anthony's theme of reality, there is another reality here, and that's the political reality. This, what is it, a recyclable? I wipe my mouth with it, or is it a burn product? Is it going to be landfilled? Odds are this is either going to go to one of the Covanta plants, or it's going to be baled into the plastic green bags that you see, put on a flatbed, and travels 1,000 miles to another landfill. And the reason why that's occurring is because the Covanta facilities are at capacity. And Covanta would love to build another facility on Long Island, state of the art, current, not the 40-year-old facilities that some of them are running. But It can't happen. And the reason why it can't happen is it's the political reality. You want change? Go see every elected official and demand change. Because the reality is that we need another burn plant. But between the NIMBYs and the cave people, the elected officials cave in. And so we have lack of options. We wouldn't be worried about necessarily what type of plastic this is if we had an option that we can convert it to energy. But we don't have that option here in Long Island. And because waste is so different in every region of the world, and especially the United States, and even in New York, prices for scrap metal can vary by $100 a ton from here to Florida just based on internal costs. So each region needs to stand on its own. And that's why early today I'm advocating that Suffolk County needs to stand on its own. In Suffolk County, I'm not advocating for Covanta, I don't even own their stock, but we need another burn plant.
And if we could monetize the other costs, that would be part of what would convince the political decision makers to do it. Right now, it's something that's not enough. It's not urgent enough for them yet. But if we monetize the rest of what it would enable, it adds to the argument. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just trying to figure out a way to make a big step up beyond what
usually a reaction to
familiar.
crisis.
Yeah.
No action.